Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Midweek Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, as well as Facebook Live and at 21stcenturywire.com, and also on X on our main account, 21st Century Wire, and at 21Wire. All those platforms and the audio streams after the program. Thank you for joining us. We originally had this program scheduled for Wednesday, but we had a delay, a couple of, not just a guest issue. We have two great guests joining us to discuss this very important topic today, but also because this story was breaking so quickly and we're just working really hard to try to get all the information together, because the more you delve into this, the more complicated and weird it gets, and it has huge geopolitical implications. And the story we're talking about right now, we'll bring this up on screen, and we will be welcoming onto the stage just in a few moments international human rights lawyer and author Arnaud Develay, as well as 21st Century Wire's own associate editor for global affairs, Freddie Ponton, both of whom are very well versed in this topic, as well as the deep geopolitical implications of this latest spat. Here we are up on stage between Russia and Azerbaijan. And as if we don't have enough to contend with internationally with Ukraine, with NATO's proxy war against Russia and Ukraine, it appears that a new front has opened up. And this isn't just any front, ladies and gentlemen. This one straddles pretty much everything in Asia and the Middle East. It really connects Russia and Iran. It is a perfect midway point between those two countries, and it is absolutely being exploited by the West and a motley coalition of Western-led actors, some of whom aren't quite in the Western camp. We'll talk about that just briefly. But that's kind of where we're at right now. And now I want to bring you up to date on this as well. And to do that, we're going to have to look at a few things. One is just the timeline here of events. And just so we have some frame of reference, again, I want to bring you back to a map of the region. There's Azerbaijan right in the middle. And as you can see, as far as strategic choke points, look at this, shares a border with Russia in the South Caucasus Mountains, as well as Georgia. This has long been a target of the Western powers in order to capture Georgia, pull it into NATO, pull it into the EU sphere as well. Then you have Armenia just there to the west of Azerbaijan, and of course Nagorno-Karabakh and other challenges in terms of territory. And Armenia squeezed between Turkey, a multifaceted, some say nefarious actor in the region. So squeezed between Azerbaijan and Turkey is Armenia, nominally pro-Russian, but in recent years we could argue, and we will talk about that in this program, it's being turned against Russia and becoming more pro-Western because of a client government in there. But Azerbaijan, most importantly to the south, as you can see, shares a border with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So right between Russia and Iran, don't tell me this isn't the most important geopolitical pivot in the world right now. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the details of that. But just to get you up to speed on this, here is the timeline that we're looking at now. This is a genuine crisis. There's no doubt about that. Let me just get you up to speed as to how we got here. Now, things kicked off. Now, obviously, this crisis between Moscow and Baku, Baku being the capital of Azerbaijan, it has deteriorated rapidly this week, especially in the aftermath of a Russian police raid on suspected organized crime in one of their regions towards the south there with a large Azeri population. Now, immediately after this FSB raid, we're talking about the Azeri mafia. This turns out to be a long-running investigation, over 20 years old. So obviously it's something that Russian law enforcement's deeply involved in. But this was, you could say, characterized by the Azerbaijani media and by Azeri's interest in Russia as an ethnic raid. So it's Russia versus ethnic Azeris, but really it's a criminal organization. As we've found, as we've dug deeper, it's maybe more than that. Could be an anti-terror organization connected with Ukraine. But last week, the Russian FSB raided a suspected Azerbaijani crime ring in the city of Yekaterinburg. And pardon me for my long pronunciation of that, but it's part of an investigation of a string of murders dated back to the early 2000s, gang assassinations, contract killings, all of this sort of stuff. Now, unfortunately, during the raid, 2 elderly suspects died. One suspected of heart failure, and another one as well. The details of that, I don't have all the details of that, but we'll show you some of the footage of that when we bring our guest on. So six suspects in the case, all of whom are Russian citizens. Okay, they're Azeri, but they're Russian citizens. Shared populations during the Soviet era. This is not uncommon within Russia. So now Azerbaijan clearly playing the ethnic card. The raid and the death of these suspects has invoked the fury of politicians in Azerbaijan, and multiple figures and leaders are basically calling for retaliation against Moscow, accusing Russian authorities of targeting the alleged crime group on the basis of their ethnicity. So as you can see, it's all shaping up, and the usual suspects probably operating behind the scenes, the usual Western-funded, USAID-funded media organs in Azerbaijan are all at it right now, trying to stir up tension. And that's where we're at right now. So what does this mean? Potential retaliations, trade, all sorts of other things are up for grabs here. These two countries, obviously, Azerbaijan especially, is heavily dependent on Russian goods, Russian minerals, even Russian oil. The Azeris don't, they get some of their oil they use from Russia domestically. They sell their own oil for the highest price available in the international market. So it is a convenient relationship with the Russian Federation in that. But here's where things really got serious. Russia basically arrested the heads of Sputnik news agency in Baku. So they're arresting these journalists, holding them basically in custody until trial for months. Now they've announced 4 months, and I think possibly. So shutting down all Russian media. This sounds like the West are behind this. Azerbaijan finds a Russian crime ring. Is the latest retaliation here. 8 Russian nationals arrested. Azeri officials claiming that they're involved in cybercrime, trafficking of drugs from Iran. Iran, of course, denies this. They say they have very strict control over the sale of narcotics. It's a capital offense in Iran. So the Azeri narrative here looks a little bit shaky. So we're not sure what to make of that. Now, let's bring on our guest, Arnaud Develay, onto the stage. He is an international human rights lawyer. He's also an author as well as a political consultant. Arnaud, welcome to the program.
Hello, Patrick. Always a pleasure.
No, the pleasure is all ours, Arnaud. And talk about a story that goes deep indeed. This one certainly does. Now, when I saw the arrest of the heads of Sputnik News in Azerbaijan, I knew that it was game on at this point, because usually this relationship has been tenuous for a number of reasons, but you've always had President Aliyev and Putin have always been seen to have a friendly public face diplomatically, even though obviously the relationship is fraught with all sorts of tensions, not least of all pressure coming from the West. And of course, the situation in Syria with Turkey is a very difficult one. What do you make of this? Just on first glance, Arnaud, what are your initial reactions of this Russian Azerbaijani crisis that's brewing now?
Yes, well, my first impression was the timing, the synchronicity between what happens in Azerbaijan, as you perfectly well summarized, and what is going on in what Azerbaijan calls Western Azerbaijan, which we know as Armenia, and where we have had also arbitrary arrests in connection with the Armenian Apostolic Church of so Russian citizen with Armenian ethnicity, but Russian citizens as well, where we learned that the individual, a businessman by the name of Samuel or Shmuel Katipinian, I think his name is now being stripped of his assets in Armenia. He's also, not unlike the Sputnik staff in Azerbaijan, being placed on remand for, in as far as he's concerned, two couple of months, 2 months, whereas the Sputnik staff has been announced to be put on remand for 4 months. So on one hand, in Armenia, we're dealing with charges more or less bearing on um, I would say what not terrorism, but incitement to destabilize the state, which is it's a kind of a garden variety charge. You can fit anything you want in there. And in Azerbaijan, as you mentioned, which is kind of ludicrous one on its face, charges of drug trafficking and cyber offenses. But what really also got my attention is how beat up the let's call it what it is, the Russian hostages were looking like. They were essentially, for many of them, beat to a pulp. Obviously, those who bore the worst stigma of that beating were not treated by any kind of doctors. It almost as if it was a setup for the media, I guess for Russian media, as a kind of humiliation ritual. They were presented into a court, I assume, put into a cage, and basically filmed looking not on their best, let's put it this way, under their best angle. So there was a lot that transpired through those images and that particular setup. Some might say that it was, as you alluded to in your introduction, directly linked to the fact that during the this FSB, or it might have been just regular regional police. I'm not quite sure which agency was involved there. A couple of suspects were killed, but all the other ones were detained temporarily before being released. And it turns out that one of the released individual during that maybe FSB raid actually assaulted one of the arresting officers, which in and of itself should prevent any kind of release. But yeah, and so there's a lot of questions here as well. Were were those people more than mere, I guess, criminal gangs? Were they sleeping cells? Were they working to destabilize parts of Russia? To the extent some of the investigation goes back 20 years, there's actually a murder charge affecting one of the suspects going back to 2001. If one recalls the situation in Russia in 2001, it's likely those people were quite ruthless in enforcing their turf. So point is, again, very fuzzy situation. Emerging facts every day come to add each other up, but all, as you said, taking place in the context of a geopolitical setup, which sees not one, not two, but potentially three countries coming somewhat together. One of them grudgingly against its own will. You mentioned the client state, the client government in place there. but almost acting like as if on cue, at a moment where we're a few months back removed from this attempted color revolution in Georgia, which let's be honest failed. And so we might be looking at the emerging pattern of a substitute, or plan B, as you were, from where? From the usual suspects, I guess, NATO, NATO and co, essentially, with the aim of what? Well, it's simple. We always got to go back to the policy papers. It's the Rand Corporation all over again. Extend and harass Russia at its borders.
Let me bring on to the stage. Thank you, Arnaud, for that good opening statement. Let me bring on to the stage the associate editor for global affairs at 21st Century Wire, Freddie Ponton, is joining us right now. Freddie, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. So I'm a little bit late today, but it's good to be on the show. Hi, Arnaud. It's good to see you.
Yeah, Freddie.
So Freddie, we're just talking about, just opening up with the timeline of events. Clearly an escalation between Azerbaijan and Russia. It looks like an escalation that's been initiated by Azerbaijan, but I feel, Freddie, that there are forces behind Azerbaijan, bigger than Azerbaijan, and I want to get your comments on what you make of this sort of breaking new front that looks like a new geopolitical front that's very quickly taking shape. Go ahead, Freddie.
Look, it's pretty straightforward, and I think Arnaud just mentioned it from what I could gather, but NATO is a very good answer as far as understanding exactly who are the people. It's always the cui bono, who profits from this unrest, destabilizations, who profit from controlling the South Caucasus. This is really about that. On my side, from a geopolitical point of view, I'm of course more focused on the historical economic roots and of course the various agreements and the ties, and what ties basically Russia with Azerbaijan. And it's really quite clear to me in I'd say my recent analysis, although it's not complete yet, but it really transpires to me that the forces at play here, which are playing behind the scenes, are clearly basically challenging, first of all, the Azerbaijan-Russia declaration on allied cooperation, which is pretty much a strategic partnership signed in 2022 between Russia and Azerbaijan. So it's all about politics, but it's also about security. It's about trade. It's about, exchanging. Azerbaijan's, geographically speaking, is a very important route because it is located between Russia and, of course, Iran and other countries in the Middle East. So it's a vital route for Russia. It's strategic. And it makes a lot of sense for Azerbaijan and Russia to be partners. And then for those that have had the chance to review the roadmap on the development of key areas of Azerbaijan-Russian cooperation, which was drawn for year 2024-2026, you can clearly see that this is a major hurdle for anyone interested in controlling the trade in these particular areas. So anything goes, really. I think the gloves are off, and we need to look beyond the vacuum of what the mainstream media has proposed us with, that usual narrative about, Russia being the bad guy, not being able to be, cannot be trusted. And you can clearly see in the reports that it's portraying Russia as, again, a not reliable partner, if you will, whether it's a strategic partner or not. It's not appreciated. It's just about basically hammering Russia at will, gloves are off. And I think it's quite clear that NATO, United States, and Israel have a major role, and we can develop from there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Freddie. And we'll get on to that also later. We'll pull up some of your previous articles on the bigger economic and geostrategic plays there. But let's listen to the spokesperson for the Kremlin here for just a moment, and his reaction initially on this, Dmitry Peskov, spokesperson for the Russian Federation. We expect that very soon, through direct contacts with the Azerbaijani side, we will be able to achieve the release. He's talking about the news directors and senior editors of Sputnik, media outlet based in Baku there. And Peskov goes on, such measures against representatives of the press, quote, do not conform to commonly accepted rules and standards and don't represent the, quote, spirit and the nature of Russian Azerbaijani relations there. I think he's putting it quite lightly, to be frank there. And so there's a lot of things that we need to unpack for the moment. And I think you both have touched on some of those. I will get to some of those key points in a moment, I think, that are going to expand this conversation a little bit. But let's also bring up on stage right now as well this, because I think we have to address this at the moment. Okay. What happened recently? U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran. Azerbaijan has been implicated in using their territory as a staging ground for drone strikes against Iran. This is a major transgression if it's proven to be correct. Many people believe that this is the case. It is such a brazen move if it is indeed the case by Azerbaijan. And you see President Aliyev here with Benjamin Netanyahu. So it's no secret about the coordination between these two countries on a military level in terms of, arms sales, advisory roles, and so forth. Israel, for its own reasons, to have this as a relationship, they needed this as a relationship in order to get a leg up, as it were, against the Iranians. And I think we may have just seen that take place a few weeks ago. And this has grave implications for the region. The U.S. is also backing Azerbaijan, as is Turkey as well. So it doesn't look like it's getting better, this story. Arnaud, firstly, your comment on the significance of the Azerbaijani-Israeli relationship, and can we read this as, by extension, as a U.S. also backed sort of relationship here as well? Your thoughts, Arnaud?
Yes, well, it's important to note that following the 2020 war, which lasted about 44 days, Azerbaijan offered the Israeli not one, not two, but three airport, I guess airbase, from which they could refuel F-35. This was before, at the time, obviously, the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad government. So Azerbaijan was viewed as a refueling stage, going around Syrian airspace. Now, obviously, the situation is pretty straightforward, literally and figuratively. But as you mentioned, it would appear that in the 12-day war, which is the term that we've come to use for the recent military conflict between Iran and Israel, some of the drones operated by the Israeli state initiated their mission from Azerbaijan. This was reported by a high member, I think, of the Iranian parliament, Majlis, and echoed by the presidency of Iran. And basically, politely but firmly prompting their Azerbaijani counterpart to conduct an investigation in that regard, while adding that Iran would assume or take on the appropriate course of action bearing on the conclusion of this investigation. From what I understand, Azerbaijan does not intend to conduct any kind of investigation on the matter. So that sets the stage for escalation between Baku and Tehran now. And hence, we're seeing two fronts. We were fond of saying that the Ukraine and the Gaza front, in a way, were somewhat loosely connected, or the Syrian front at the time with the Ukraine front. But now we have the connection between what goes on in as far as Azerbaijani relation and Armenian Russian relations are concerned, and the emerging pattern of ill will activities emanating from Azerbaijan in as far as Iran is concerned, with right smack in the middle of it all, the Israelis, egged on by the Americans and the British, who also have an air base in Azerbaijan.
The British. Go figure. Stirring up ethnic strife. That's the specialty of the of British intelligence. I mean, let's not be naive. Freddie, your thoughts on this? We add Israel into the mix here. We have NATO. We have Turkey. We have the United States, no doubt, looking to capitalize on this pivot as well. And look at the position of Azerbaijan, sharing a border with Russia and Iran. So if there's anything that provides the ultimate, you could say geopolitical joint or gear joint to re-engineer or to destabilize the region, this looks like the one. Freddie, go ahead.
Yes, Patrick, I think Arnaud said it well. Azerbaijan has opened its airspace and its soil, if you will, to Israel and to the United States. I think we have now enough evidence and report that confirms that Israel has access to air base in Azerbaijan, and we also have confirmation and reports of a major CIA base in Azerbaijan as well. So if you take that, the level of intelligence that comes out of these particular areas that is focused on Iran. Once upon a time, it was focused on Syria, but it's quite clear that it's coming to the forefront after the 12 days war. So there's a reason why there's an acceleration in the news, in this destabilization, and this is all intelligence and counterintelligence work in the regions for the control of this region, as I explained earlier, for the economic purposes, but it's also a very important strategic geographical place, if you will, for NATO or for the US or for Israel to control, should they decide to go back at war with Iran, because we talk about ceasefires and truce and all that, but at the end of the day, it is quite clear if you read the Israeli press that no one wants the peace. I think it is quite clear that Netanyahu feels that this is an unfinished business, and that he intends to carry on and to drag likely the United States further into this conflict. So it's not over yet. It's just a pause, but there's a much bigger picture than that, because a strong Iran allied with Russia and China, with having good relationship with Azerbaijan, which they've tried a lot, and they're still doing it so far. So it's not that the Iranians don't like the Azeris. Quite the opposite. They've done a lot to trying to smooth this relationship, and they're working at it. So they understand the importance of this region, of this country. Unfortunately, my personal view on this, I might be wrong, and that's okay to be wrong. But my personal view is that Azerbaijan is playing a bit of a game here that is a dangerous game, because when you're playing with small nations, the consequences and repercussions are small. But when you're playing with major players like Russia, China, and Iran, and you're trying to please Israel, you're trying to please the United States, you allow these countries to have base, to conduct intelligence operations, you become not just a vassal, but accomplice to war. You become an accomplice into that. So for now, we have a denial from the president, from Aleph. He's denying all the alleged accusations with regards to the use of drone and mini aircraft, popping out of Azerbaijan and coming into the Iranian border. So he's denying. However, I don't think that Iran will make, and has no interest to make, false allegation. What's Iran is saying to Azerbaijans, look, there's a lot of report there, and there is no fire without smoke, smoke without fire. Sorry. So clearly, something must be happening, and then if we know as journalists we are capable to find out and get enough evidence to comfortably say that there are intelligence bases used by the US and by Israel in Azerbaijan, surely the Iranian intelligence must have, and the Russian intelligence must have a lot of information on these activities. And I think this is really what it's all about at this moment in time. They got caught basically helping the Israeli and the US. And I think Russia is reacting, and I think Iran is more cautious. The Persians have a different mindset as the Russian, because the Russians can bully a little bit if they want to, because they're just a big state, a big player, a world player. Iran is probably not at this level, but clearly strategically they'll feel more emboldened with their strategic alliance with Russia. They just want accountability, and they want to know where they stand. And that's where I think it's going to evolve in terms of placing on the chessboard, if you will, Azerbaijan, and understanding what Baku is going to be. Is he going to be another NATO vassal state? Is he going to be another Israeli, US-backed kind of a playground to kind of manage their both conflict? As you mentioned, Ukraine is still ongoing, and Iran is not even finished. So you have in the middle a country here that offered so much strategic position, geographically, geopolitically speaking, and that disturbed tremendously Russia, because Russia understands the value of Azerbaijan, and is certainly not interested in not undermining, but even damaging this relationship. So someone is playing behind the scene, and that's what we are seeing at the moment.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Thank you, Freddie. And let's bring the map back up. Arnaud, Freddie alluded to some things that may be going on from our intelligence services in the U.S. Of course, the British are no doubt have an office and a file open on this area for decades, at the very least. So they are the sort of masters of ethnography and language and signals intelligence on all these areas, right back to the Cold War. But look at the position, and why is this important? Well, listen, Operation Spider's Web. How we know operations. We'll look at the map of Operation Spider's Web. These are all the different attacks on the surprise drone attacks that hit all these different points. This was last month. And so there's clearly infiltration inside Russian territory, deep inside Russian territory, able to pass through what are largely tightly controlled borders, at least over in the western borders of Russia, the European side. Very sensitive military installations dotted around the country. But we're thinking now Operation Spider's Web looks like it was also deployed against Iran, quite clearly. Very similar operation. I think that's beyond debate at this point. So looking at this and then looking at the map, Arnaud, do you think it's reasonable to suspect that the Azeri border, and by the way, all the top U.S. analysts that we listen to in the intelligence community have all remarked that the fingerprints of Mossad look like it was on the Iranian Operation Spider's Web. On the Ukrainian Operation Spider's Web surprise attack that hit Russia's long-range deterrent. So is the U.S., Ukrainian intelligence, British intelligence, and Israeli intelligence. And clearly we saw similar patterns with Iran, with the attack, Israel's attack on Iran in the, quote, 12 days war. So if that's the case, and if we're right, this looks like the perfect staging ground for a lot of these operations. Arnaud, is that unreasonable to suspect this? Your thoughts?
No, it's not unreasonable at all. When one considers also the substantial presence of Azeris living in Russia as Russian citizens, to be sure, as you mentioned in your introduction. but also as a flow of migrants, which very often outstay their visas to the extent they even had one in the first place. And you make a good point when you say that while it's difficult to conceive how all this equipment and logistical deployment could make its way through the western borders of Russia. The opposite is somewhat plausible as far as the underbelly of Russia. So you could easily, yes, use transit routes, accomplices on the other side of the border, to collect equipment that is disassembled and hidden carefully within, I don't know, fake ceilings in innocuous transportation food trucks, what have you, and over a period of 18 months, predicated on the identification of sensible targets, carry out all this equipment to be reassembled nearby those very targets, while waiting for the go-ahead, which will be obviously given by most likely foreign states, foreign to the regions anyway, and in a simultaneous fashion, so that the impact is maximal. And so, yes, the MO is exactly the same, whether you look at what happened in Russia about a month and a half ago, and what happened in Iran about 2.5 weeks ago now. And the timeline, the schedule fits to a T. It's almost like both countries were targeted, or at least the decision to implement this type of operation might have been made more or less at about the same time. And I may add, if you recall what happened in Lebanon with the pager operation, it's the same MO all over again. If I may say, there's an interesting aspect to the Iranian operation, is that the one of the high commander of the Guardian of the Revolution, he was responsible logistically. He was the architect essentially of True Promise 1 and 2, which had such an impact in as far as its accuracy and its ability to penetrate the vaunted Iron Dome. I think his name was General Azibejadeh, something like this. But he died. He was martyred in the opening 18 hours. He was part of the top crop that was targeted, and he didn't make it. He had actually discovered what the Israelis were about to do. And the Israeli actually, not unlike in Lebanon, when also the operation was discovered, they decided to move the clock forward and go ahead right now, rather than waste months and months of equipment and investment in manpower on the ground and logistics and penetration and complicity and what have you. So was the 12-day war actually supposed to have started at that particular moment, right before the 6th round of talks in Oman? Or was that actually, as is peddled anyway, in some circles, a kind of a situation that arose which forced the Israelis' hands? The jury is still out on this, but it seems to be somewhat reminiscent of what happened also in Lebanon with that pager operation. Another thing that I wanted to add is essentially, you're right, the ethnic card played by Azerbaijan. We seem to be somehow seeing the implementation of what some of those so-called Forum for Democracy, financed by, well, what have you, USAID, the anti-colonial, i.e. the colonial master being Russia, anti-colonial Forum for Democracy. They are being organized at least once a year, if not for sure every couple of years. Most recently, I think in one of the Baltic states. And this idea is that, yes, the substract of Russian society as currently organized sees a somewhat neo-colonial, modern colonial state which has never undergone its own decolonization process. And in that sense, if the tuning of the Azeri elites by the Western curator is that their brethren in Russia are somehow being oppressed on the account of their ethnicity, that fits right with this narrative. So I just wanted to add that.
Perfect, perfect. It does have the same MO that you'd expect from that type of subversion via USAID and all these sort of organs, what we call the smart power organs,
Yes.
funded by the West. Now,
I will add that there are 14 million Iranian citizens of Azeri descent or Azeri ethnicity living in Iran. 14 million, which are most of them living nearby the border between Iran and Azerbaijan. So that could be also a huge reservoir to activate, to the extent some seriously engineered appeal to their real loyalty is done, predicated on the development of a geopolitical crisis. It's something that also has to be keeping people awake at night in Tehran.
And I just brought the ethnography and religious map up on the screen for Iran. And as Arnaud was just saying, the 12 or 14 million Iranians of Azeri descent there up in the northwestern tip of the country. Those are in aqua blue, bright aqua blue. You can see up in the just the upper left-hand corner of the Iranian territory there, next to a brown enclave that represents the Kurdish enclave within the Iranian borders. And then you can see there's other groups as well, most notably the Baluch group, or Baluchistan, as it were, just in the lower southeastern tip of Iran, just down there on this, near the Gulf of Oman. And so that's also consequential, obviously sharing a border with Pakistan. The Baluchis, of course, used by Western intelligence previously in order to destabilize and so forth. Obviously, a lot of arms trafficking through the Baluchi markets and so forth, notorious for that. And so, yeah, there's a big discussion there. Certainly, the Brookings Institute, the RAND Corporation, look at this type of map, as do British intelligence, thinking 12 ways till Sunday. How can we disrupt, break up, and destabilize this country along the various religious and ethnographic lines? Now, Freddie, I want to just go back very quickly and get your comment on what we were talking about before. Freddie, it's no secret that the Ukrainians are working out of country now. We saw that in Syria before the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the deployment of drone tech and all these sort of asymmetric warfare tactics that have been perfected in Ukraine. And so, if this Ukrainian operation, quote, Spider's Web, was deployed via Azerbaijan, as well as other terrorist attacks inside Russia, reminiscent of Operation Gladio, but more specifically, almost a repeat in Iran with Israelis attack here. Now we have this bigger kind of constellation of intelligence and operations that include the U.S., that include NATO intelligence, that includes Israeli intelligence, Ukrainian operatives and intelligence as well, and pretty much British intelligence, MI6. So this is a bit frightening and disturbing in that we're looking at this kind of larger entity of multiple states working together in concert to disrupt, to destabilize, to do terrorist attacks in Russia and in Iran. That's what it looks like to me. I want to get your thoughts on this, adding the Ukrainian element to this as well. Freddie, go ahead.
Yes, look, it makes sense to me. It's hard to prove. The evidence are I mean, so there are evidence out there. It's just difficult to put this puzzle together because it's a real micmac of intelligence work. So you have operations, especially the British, involved in the design of these operations, and then after that, these operations are repeated, if you will, or they are reused, redesigned, if you will, depending on the theater. But there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, and based on the evidence that are available in the open source, that we can clearly see that the same actors are at play in Ukraine and in a war against Iran. So the geographic here is what really gives up, basically, and tells you that the northern part of Iran, with, as you mentioned, Erbil, Kurdistan, all these areas, plus this major Azeri community in the northern part of Iran, and Azerbaijan's playing double game. It quite makes sense to me with the presence, the heavy presence in Baku of CIA, MI6, and Israeli Mossad. I think if you put it all together, you can clearly see that the center for the operation and the use of whatever design was put in place for attacks on Russian borders and Russian hotspots was transferred to that particular zone. Of course, it was applied to the geographical challenge and the particular areas. But what will be very interesting is to look at the map of where the Israeli and the US strikes, and you're going to see that proximity and how it's much easier for the US, for Israel to fly or to basically activate cells already within the countries, and as well gathering and getting the intelligence from the border, whether it's Kurdish border, whether it's Azerbaijan orders. So there's no doubt for me that the Russians have spotted that. I mean, they must have seen some movement. They have also deep network. Don't forget, this was a zone of influence for the Russian for many, many years. It's always been challenged by the Brits and the American. But this is still a place where there are a major intelligence network conducted by the Russian in this area. So they know what's happening in Ukraine. They know who's behind all these operations. And obviously they're going to see these guys. They're going to see these particular patterns repeated in an attack on Iran. And I'm sure the analysts already concluded that Azerbaijan somehow played a role. Now they're going to have to put the puzzle together. Look at Erbil, because Erbil is a CIA base. That's all it is. It's a training camp for CIA operators. That's all I'm going to say. But I know it personally, so I can tell you that this region is just. It's just what it is. It is what it is. And the recruitments, a lot of recruitments and training of new recruits happen in this particular region. So it's not hard for me and to believe that some Azeris are trained in Kurdistan and vice versa, and then implanted further down into Iran. But they are agent destabilizer. They're there to destabilize the regime, to provide a role and the logistics that is necessary to bring weapons, you name it, explosives, and to recruit more people to destabilize. Because I think if we look at the big pictures in terms of destabilizing Iran, what are the options available for the US and Israel today? Is whether Israel is going to be able to say, well, we have no other choice. We're going to use the nuclear weapon, maybe a low-yield weapon, and trying to take this place out. But they don't know where to shoot anymore because everything has been moved. They don't have access to the enriched uranium. They probably have no idea where this is at the moment. New centrifuge has been, and Cascade has been already placed in other areas that is even less accessible than Fordo and Ashvan and other areas. So at the moment, they're going to be shooting in the dark. I think the Iranians have really kind of learned the lessons in this one, and they're not going to trust anybody anymore. I think they're done with this. So what are the options? And the options really at this moment is probably moving away from a kind of, heavy strike or nuclear low-yield strike to some kind more subversive, something that they can use and say, okay, why don't we use the assets we have within the countries and keep on feeding that and trying to create a chaos, to coerce basically some part of the public into removing the current regime. Well, I wish them good luck for that, because we saw the display of love they have for the supreme leader after the 12 days war. It's not going to happen in Tehran. It's not going to happen even anything near to Tehran. So it's going to have to come from the border, from these particular communities, and that's where the intelligence work is going to happen, I believe. I think Iran's going to benefit a lot from Russian intelligence from this particular region, which we know as the South Caucasus, because this is a region that the Russians know very, very well. And I think they're not going to show what they have, but I think they have their attitude, in my view, knowing the Russians, and I know Russians pretty well. That's what they do. They're not going to show their card, but they know what they're doing. If they're going to keep on putting pressure, and they're not going to put pressure via the media, they're going to sit down with the Azerbaijanis and say, okay, we know what you've done. There's two ways we can go. We can show that to the Iranians. They're going to get really pissed off at you because now you are belligerents. Or we can reaffirm our strategic cooperations, stick to the documents, stick to the treaties, stick to what we've put in place. And the idea of pushing Azerbaijan in the arms of Turkey for security purposes is extremely challenging, and it's not given. It is just not an easy shot, because Azerbaijan will be a constant target from now on if that was to happen.
Yeah, and then there's the Turkish claim that Azerbaijan is part of the greater Turkic tribe and so forth. So this gets into the new Turkey, neo-Ottomanism. But listen, before we go, I want to talk about Armenia, because this is a moving part on all this now. Now, before I get to there, I want to bring this up on screen. I just want to get both of your opinion very quickly on what you think about the former Iranian president Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash after visiting the border, a shared sort of dam project between Azerbaijan and Iran. They christened this new part of this infrastructure project, and on flying back, Raisi disappears in the fog, and everyone killed on board his helicopter, including other high-ranking officials. Now, at the time, there was no evidence that foul play was involved. Certainly, Iranians are not admitting it. But in your opinion, seeing everything that we've seen now in the last couple of months since then, I want to go back to both of you. We'll start with Arnaud. Do you think there was potential involvement of, Azerbaijan, Israel, or other actors? In other words, do you think this was more than an accident, the death of President Raisi? Arnaud, go ahead.
Well, to be sure, at this day, there is no definite answer to this, what is an allegation at this point. Suffice it to say, though, that those bases, Israeli-ran bases that I've mentioned earlier, happen to be located in the southern part of the late Artsakh, so-called Artsakh Republic, which is right next to the border area where the ceremony took place, after which Raisi attempted to fly back to Iran. So it is not outside the fathomable to imagine that there might have been some, some devices, some technology activated so as to render the control of the helicopter useless, with the consequences that in the current weather, in the then weather conditions, this would ensure that the plane would crash, the helicopter would crash. But again, I'm just speculating at this point. But we have to look at the area again. You always look at the maps, and south of the because the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh was not the only area proper reclaimed by Azerbaijan, but also a whole slew of regions south, west and south of this enclave, going all the way down to to the border with Iran. So those are the areas where those Israeli bases are located at.
Thank you. And Fred, your thoughts? Do you think there was any foul play with the death of former Iranian President Raisi in this helicopter accident, so to speak? What do you think?
Do I think there was a foul play here? Yeah, absolutely. I think. Can I prove it? No, I can't. But this is the natures of sabotage. This is the this covert operation. This kind of technology that I use today that are untraceable. There's so many ways to take out choppers, planes, without leaving a trace. And this technology is available today to, in different countries, in the United States, certainly in Ukraine, certainly to Israel. So could they do it? Absolutely. Can we prove it? Right now, I'm sure the Iranians are still looking into it. But technology evolves and, forensic is catching up. That's what forensic do. You go to a crime scene, you're going to discover, or you're going to analyze what exists, what's out there, but if there are new products, new things that are being used, you might not necessarily spot it straight, but maybe later on, and I'm quite sure within years, we might have more information on this, but right now we're in the dark, and I don't think the Iranians are interested in keeping this story out. They've moved on like they did when they were attacked, by surprise in June, on the 13th. They did the same. They moved on. They react quickly. They reorganize themselves. They don't want to see weak, and they want to make sure they send the right signal out there. But I'm quite confident that they are still looking into this. I'm quite confident they are still looking into it, but they won't speak about it because also this relationship with Azerbaijan is very important to them. So this can be, again, if they find something, you will never hear about it. They'll never make it public. This is going to be a leverage against, positions, geopolitical move, intelligence, and so on and so forth. So I believe we will never, hear from that, even if they were to find it, unless it's leaked internally.
It's worth more in the drawer than it is outside in public. Yeah,
that's how it works.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This being said, if it was indeed an attempted or a successful operation by the Israeli, this would have marked but the first one of a long series, because a month later, on June 14th, so the downing of Raisi's helicopter was on May 19th, 2024. June 14th, 2024, the new Iranian president was being intronized, and Ania was taken out in Tehran, of all places. Then fast forward to September, they take out Nasrallah and all the Red One leadership, essentially, and the number two of Hezbollah. Yeah.
And the pager attack. And the pager attack.
The pager attack, yes.
Yeah.
In December, the Assad government is collapsing. And I think in between or early 2025, Sinwar is taken out. And
the Assad collapse with the app that was used to infiltrate the Syrian armed forces. Again, attack weapon that was deployed. Yeah.
Again, to locate collect as much information on the rank and files and their affectation, and to the extent some of them could be amenable to collect bribes. Yes.
Yeah.
So again, yes,
the only country it hasn't worked against are the Houthis. So they haven't been able to penetrate.
They're working on it, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're working on it.
Good luck, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So here's a moving part. I want to get your comment on Armenia. Freddie, you're welcome to chime in. I am conscious of time because, Freddie, I want to give you a chance just to talk about the middle corridor after this. But if you have a comment on Armenia, certainly. But Arnaud, I know you've been following the shift in Armenia. This is Radio Free Europe, and this was even a couple of years ago. Is Armenia turning to the West? And Pashinyan, the president there, is more and more, Arno, being regarded as a Western tool, basically. This bleeding the sovereignty of Armenia little by little and really turning it into a shell of a sovereign state. And of course, this is hugely important. Armenia tends to ally with Iran, tends to have an adversarial relationship with Turkey, and tends to be pro-Russian. That means it's got a big target painted on it, Arno. Now, where does Armenia sit in this? Because this is a very important part of anything when we're talking about Iran and Azerbaijan is the Armenian conversation. Your initial thoughts on this, Arno? Go ahead.
Well, this Armenian setup has got all the trappings of a Shakespearean play. A weak king which finds itself staring into the abyss in order to cling to a modicum of power. And this is pretty much what characterizes this Nicole Pachinian ever since he erupted on the stage in 2018. But yes, we would have to do a summary recap of what has happened since he came to power. Obviously, we had that long-standing issue of the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, which we have to go back to the fall of the Tsarist Empire, which during a short while saw then the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan declare their independence. And at the time, the enclave was part of Azerbaijan. The issue had not risen to the fore yet. Fast forward to 1921, when under Stalin, who was then the commissar for the nationalities, basically decided to, as the Soviet Union was, after having won the Civil War, was reaffirming its control over those regions, basically created the Armenian Soviet Republic and the Azerbaijani Soviet Republic, with the added caveat that Nagorno-Karabakh would be part, even though it was heavily ethnically peopled by Armenian, was to be part of the Azerbaijani Soviet Republic. Now, if we go back to the 4th century BC and the glory days of the Kingdom of Armenia, this particular enclave is considered part of the 12 tribes of Armenia. So in the collective consciousness of Armenian, this is Armenia, as much as you can conceive it. But if we take into account the law of successor states, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, basically this area is Azerbaijan, on a pure legal standpoint. And so in 1988, when glasnost was introduced by what would become the last general secretary of this Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, glasnost, also called transparency, allowed for people to voice out their grievances, and that soon came to include nationalistic sentiment. And the tensions between Armenian and or at least within Armenia, as far as this enclave, quickly came to the fore in 1988. And as you would have it, when the center collapsed in 1991, the Armenian basically made their move. And that war lasted 3 years until 1994, and what came to be known as the Bishkek Protocol, that basically led to the creation of this self-proclaimed Artsakh Republic, which its own parliament and its own executive branch, but not recognized by anybody within the UN system. And so things remained pretty much in stasis like this from 1994 to 2020, with a notable increase, qualitative change starting in 2008, owing to the increase in the price of oil that and the discovery of oil supplies within Azerbaijan that allowed Azerbaijan to quintuple, multiply by 5 its military budget, and in so doing, benefit also from technologies from Turkey, obviously, as you mentioned, the Turkic nation par excellence. And we started seeing from 2008 to 2020 a complete flip in terms of military forces in presence. And so when Azerbaijan felt that it was ready to move in and wash the front of 1994, they moved in. They moved in for the kill, and that was not even like a fair fight. Now, to be sure, during that time, the 2020 conflict, Pachinian, that was noted by an Armenian expert, and that's quite important, never deployed the Armenian army per se, but only called for volunteers militia to go and fight to defend the enclave. So that in a way, it was almost as if he never gave uh, the Armenian people at large all the tools that they would have needed to, at least maybe fight the Azerbaijani to a standstill. But basically, that's what happened, and they were soundly defeated after 44 days. And more recently, the Azeri basically went for the final kill. They imposed a blockade on the enclave, and they proceeded to liquidate this Artsakh Republic anomaly and have it become de facto and de jure, as it was always meant to be, a part and parcel of Azerbaijan. In the meantime, a significant portion of the 100 and some thousand people who lived of Armenian descent who lived in the enclave for security reasons were forced to flee toward Armenia proper. So there's the issue of the UNESCO patrimoine still lying in the churches. Those are millennia churches, but to the extent there's but a skeleton crew maybe left there to attend to them, and they're not being attended by worshippers anymore. And we know what happened. I mean, Azerbaijan made a lot of promises to give grant equal rights to those who would wish to stay behind and grant them Azerbaijani citizenship. But you have to understand that as an Armenian in the Armenian collective consciousness, the cohabitation with Turkic people in general has not gone well historically, and so those are empty words. And to illustrate that point, many of those people who were forced to flee actually burned their houses down, so that the Azerbaijani would not just come in and scoop it up. So
ethnic
this is basically
cleansing.
the situation. Yes, yes, exactly.
It's really
So
terrible.
this is the setup. But politically, obviously, Pachinian is now being pointed as the guy who lost part of the of one of the core of the heart of Armenia in the public consciousness anyway, if anything. And so he's a lame duck. There's going to be elections in Armenia in 2026, which, if we go by current projections, Pachinian should lose them. This could explain also why he's stepped up the agenda to show himself to be an indispensable tool to whoever he's talking to from the West, because he needs protection now. And in exchange, I guess they're the one now telling him to accelerate the dismantling of the Apostolic Church in Armenia. Apostolic Church, as the name indicates, is that every top clergy leader of this denomination is actually appointed by direct successor. If we go all the way back to the apostle Saint Gregory, Saint Gregory the Illuminator was the one who founded the Apostolic Church in Armenia. Armenia was the first country to convert to Christianity in 301 AD. And so it is in the national sense, not just an administrative construct. In the national sense, the Apostolic Church of Armenia is the stronghold of Armenia. Any Armenian, wherever they live in the world, to establish their right to citizenship, have to show their certificate of baptism as a proof that they belong. So what essentially, and I'll try to be brief and wrap it up here. What Pacino is trying to do essentially is somewhat of an Armenian redux of what we saw in Ukraine in 2018 when they induced this artificial schism. What he wants to do is try to create a government-friendly Church of Armenia, which has no resemblance whatsoever, because by replacing the I don't know how they call it locally, but the top person at the clergy right now, whose house was raided by people dressed up in anti-terrorist gears, like just a few days ago. They attempted to arrest him. A lot of people knew about it. The bells usually they only ring when there's a major event. They were ringing. Everybody came and formed a human cordon around the residence of this. It's not a patriarch, obviously, but this archdiocese.
Similar, yeah.
Yes. And so those goons had to basically step back. But and also this explains why this businessman, I forgot his last name. They have always long last name. Samuel, I guess. Katarosian, something along those lines. He's a big benefactor. He owns lots of businesses in Russia and a lot of assets also in Armenia. So he was arrested. He's being placed on remand for a couple of months now, again on charges of incitement to destabilize the state and
State of
Armenia.
State of Armenia. Okay.
Yes.
And if you can just wrap it up, because we're running out of time. But I want to get to Freddie. Go ahead.
Yeah. The Armenian parliament yesterday adopted a law to basically strip him of his assets. So we can expect that he will be at some point released because he's a Russian citizen, and I don't think they want to go that far. But basically they are removing what they perceive as the attelage around which a real strong legitimate opposition within Armenia could be mounted.
So again, all eyes on Armenia. It's definitely a weak link there that's in the process of they're trying to collapse it, basically. Thank you for that, Arnaud. Now, Freddie, I want to finish off here about just a quick look at the geopolitical significance of all of this here. This is an article by Freddie Ponton up at 21stcenturywire.com. South Caucasus instability and new battle for the, quote, middle corridor here. Just very briefly, Freddie, because we only have a few minutes, and I have a couple of these articles I want to show real quick. Obviously, there's this one. Also, Iran and China railway project, the steel arteries of independence. That's also a really important one, as well as this one here, the International North-South Transport Corridor, the INSTC, the underlying cause of U.S.-Iranian tensions here. And obviously there's a very strong case. Of course, we've got the maps as well. As you can see, Azerbaijan playing a absolutely crucial way station role within that whole matrix of this potential new trade route that's going to connect Europe and Asia in ways that have never been seen before in history. I do probably think this is a problem for the Americans and the British, for starters, as well as probably the Israelis too, who have an eye on the Suez Canal and controlling that once again. So Fred, on this point, we'll go back to the middle corridor. I want to give you a couple of minutes. If you could just quickly run through these three items and why they're significant in the context of the story we're talking about today. Go ahead, Fred.
Sure, thanks, Pat. Well, this is really about the trade between Asia and the East and the West, if you will. This is really this critical route that is embedded as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So China, Russia, and all the countries, the five-nation railway corridor, known as the FNRC, are very much focused on stabilizing this economic corridor. Now, how does that plug in is really where it's important. We've covered a lot the Middle Corridor Initiative, and it is increasingly crucial, as I say, to understand these trade routes are connecting not only just China, but Central Asia, and of course, all the way down to Europe. And that's basically when Azerbaijan comes in, because, if you will, the vital trade route in the South Caucasus is known as the Zangezur corridor. Okay, it's really what it's about at the moment. And if you're reading the Azerbaijani press at the moment, especially those sponsored by USAID kind of outfits or endowment for democracy, you'll see that they are keep on reporting that Turkey and Armenia and Azerbaijan have been basically are very close to a consensus that would essentially eliminate Russia's involvement in this particular strategic corridor, that is the Zangezur corridor. So that's a very good point to understand, because obviously Russia has a very important role to play in that. And what they're trying to do is to remove Russia's role or potential role in these corridors and replace it with Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. So that's a really a considerable disruptions from the plans and the roadmap that Russia and Azerbaijan have laid together over the past few years. And that really creates a major geopolitical tensions, because what it does, it's really kind of stop, if you will, and it's kind of undermine the northern routes as well as the middle corridors in terms of accessing the route into Europe. Because at the end of the day, you can bring all your product and all your trade to Baku, to the Caspian Sea, but you need that road to take it through Armenia and then all the way down to Turkey and Europe. If you cannot do that, then you're going to have to go the northern road. And because of the conflict with Ukraine and so on, everything is more complex at the moment. So I think the timing at the moment and what we are seeing and the events that we are seeing are very much about punishing Russia and trying to convince Azerbaijan to remove Russia from these equations, and having Armenia and Turkey becoming the new kind of partners into this Zangezur corridor. I'm going to write about this and I'll probably publish something about this tomorrow. But if there is a story, this is the one. It is the story of the Zangezur corridor, Patrick.
Thanks, Freddie. And you've laid those out. Obviously, those are articles up at 21stcenturywire.com. People can access that. Just put Middle Corridor into the search bar at 21st Century Wire. Those reports have articles by Freddie as well as in the global affairs section there. Arnaud, based on what Freddie has just said, the bigger geopolitical picture here, very, very tricky balance of relationships that Russia is trying to pull off. Anything that's got Turkey involved obviously is automatically tricky. But just your reaction to what Freddie is talking about, Arnaud, before we wrap this up. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's reminiscent of the backdrop to the Syrian so-called civil war, which is all about pipelines and trying to get the premium access to energy resources to your clients. And so what we're seeing is just somewhat of a larger version, because obviously, as Freddie pointed out, this middle corridor fits within the larger network of nodes characterizing this One Belt, One Road initiative. So we're dealing with nothing less than whoever, it's a winner takes all situation, essentially. If what we've come to call the Primakov triangle, i.e. Russia, Iran, and China, somehow manage to ward off the hyena from NATO and their client states, they'll be able to establish, a contiguous and prosperous trade network of trade routes for the next century. If not, then the West might find a way to postpone its long announced demise. It's a very existential conflict, to be sure. If we look deeper into what's at stake for all the parties involved here, especially the West.
Yeah, it is, and that's why I wanted to end this discussion on this, because I think this is obviously the bigger picture here. I think you both agree on that, and there is a huge amount at stake for everybody involved, not least of all the Russian Federation and China and Iran, just for starters, but pretty much everybody else somehow, either on negatively or positively, has a stake in what's going to happen at this geopolitical pivot point. We can't stress this enough. It's something that I think is probably going to determine the trajectory of this before it's all said and done, whenever that is. But gentlemen, I want to thank you for this, a very important discussion. Obviously, a little bit off the beaten track, this topic, compared to what everybody's talking about right now. But I do think that this is important, and it just connects everything. And I can't think of two better people to talk about this with than Arnaud Develay and Freddie Ponton. Thank you for joining us on the Midweek Wire, both of you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No, for another informative discussion, folks. And again, those are all up at 21stcenturywire.com. We'll have other reports in due course on this as well. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Appreciate you guys joining us this midweek. Again, we usually broadcast on Wednesday, but because of various difficulties in getting the show out, we've just postponed it a day. That's the beauty of the Midweek Wire, is we do have that option to exercise if we need to on the midweek schedule. So thank you for joining us for this as well. And we were off on Sunday, so if you were looking for the Sunday Wire this past weekend, I was on the road. We were recording at the Sounds Beautiful Festival in beautiful Dorset in the south of England, and that was with the UK column. That will be, if not, I think it was a broadcast this week on the UK column. You can find that up at ukcolumn.org. I'll probably repost that as well at 21stcenturywire.com. Great event, chance to connect with people in real life from all over the UK and even internationally. Met some of our great fans and people who follow us from Italy and Europe were there as well. Great festival, great group of people. Sounds beautiful. Again, the Sunday Wire will be back, regular scheduled programming this Sunday, and things are going to get interesting, folks. We'll do our best to bring you the news, the views, and the analysis as we normally do. But until that time, we will be back very soon, in a couple of days, so look at us there. Also check 21stcenturywire.com. We've got reports going up and analysis every day, and so we really appreciate it. And again, please support this platform. We really need your support, whether it's donations or subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. We are running not just 21stcenturywire.com, but we're running at least 4 video sharing platform channels, as well as Telegram and a number of social media accounts, including X. We've got 2 accounts there and 2 on Facebook, as well as a few other platforms, I think Instagram and TikTok. We've also got viral videos and hot takes up on those platforms. All of that takes resources, folks, so we need your help to keep that going and to keep this platform growing and not just surviving, but thriving into the future. We've got a lot of work to do. We need your help to make that happen. Those of you who do support us, thank you very much. I know you guys are watching and listening, so if you haven't already, do think about just kind of giving us a visit there at the donate button at the top of 21stcenturywire.com. Need your support now more than ever. That's all we've got time for today, so I want to say thank you very much for joining us. And as we go with the outro on the live streams, we want to probably quite fittingly place a little request here, music video from our friends at Red Rumble, great band out of Scandinavia. Take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.
For in the final analysis, we all inhabit this small planet, and we are all mortal.
Lately I've been watching the world gone mad. Brothers and sisters full to take a stand, to hate their fellow man, another man. Divide and conquer is the acronym plan. Distract the people, control the story. Don't believe your lying eyes, you know me. Stay in power, no matter what. Playing with the doomsday clock. Turn a blind eye and gamble your trust. Pushing us to turn to good. Corruption and lies. Truth is the crime, will turn to dust. Well-designed misery to keep you on edge, make you believe anything anyone says. Keep it left or right, not top or bottom. Accuse the victim, can't you see we got 'em? Stay in power, no matter what. Playing with the doomsday clock. Turn a blind eye and gamble your trust. Pushing us to turn to dust. We've captured rights. Feudals our time will turn to dust. Industrialized brutality, commercialized cruelty, people as commodity, cheer on war atrocity.